Welcome to Focus on Albany. I'm Cynthia Pooler, and my guest today is Ross Barkan. And Ross is a journalist, and he also ran for the state senate a few years back. And we're going to have a discussion about Brian Benjamin. So, Ross, when you heard on the news the other day that Benjamin was arrested, were you surprised?
I wasn't totally surprised. You never know when arrests and indictments are going to come. So, the timing is always an issue. But he had been under a scandal cloud for a very long time. The issue with his campaign donations have been brought to light at the beginning of 2021 with the report in the city. And so it was clear he had real ethical challenges, real issues with how he managed his campaign finances. There had been the report about him abusing the per diem system when he was a state senator in Albany. So for me, even when he was named lieutenant governor last summer, I was surprised Hochul invested so much in him because it was clear already that there were growing scandal clouds. Whether it led to a federal indictment, you never know. But when you want to choose someone to on your ticket and serve in your government, you really want a politician who there's not even the faintest of hints that they are engaged in corruption or alleged corruption. And and so I can't say I was surprised. Certainly, the timing was not necessarily what I expected. I can't say I imagined he would be arrested in April, but if I also could not have said that I was shocked that Brian Benjamin would be facing a federal indictment.
No, back when Kathy Hochul assumed the governorship, that was her first major decision. And in hindsight, it wasn't thought through pretty well. Ultimately, do you think this is going to hurt her?
I think it can hurt her. She's still in a very strong position for the primary. She has far more money than her two top rivals, Jamani Williams and Tom Swazi. She is still the favorite in the general election because New York is an overwhelmingly Democratic state, though there is the worry that in this tough midterm environment, a Republican could do pretty well. But it's a real bad headline for her, and it's something her opponents can continue to bring up, and it's something she has to answer for. So I do think it can be overcome. I think the biggest issue for her right now is she could be saddled with a lieutenant governor next year that she did not want in her administration. And that could be the progressive candidate Ana Maria Archila, who is running very much as an anti-Hochul candidate, as someone who is proudly of the left. She probably would prefer Diana Reina, who's the candidate running with Tom Swazi. The Swazi himself has been very hostile to Hochul. So it's not an ideal situation for her where there's not really a mechanism to get him off the ballot. And the winner of the primary will be on her ticket in the general, and the winner will be someone she didn't pick to be on her ticket. It's not a situation that a governor wants to be in.
Well, Cuomo was not too thrilled. If he did not step down and he ran again and he wasn't involved in all these scandals, he wasn't really thrilled to have Kathy Hochul run as his running mate again, right?
Yes, he was looking to get her off the ticket. He wanted a downstate politician, perhaps a black or Latino politician, as there were reports to that effect. He never felt very close to her. She never challenged him or undermined him in any way, but she was just very far from his inner circle. And he felt that she had outlived her usefulness. He brought her on in part for gender balance and in part because he wanted to perform better in Western New York. In 2018, she had a hard time beating Jumaane Williams in the primary while he easily defeated Cynthia Nixon. So he even saw her to some extent as a liability and really tried to get her off the ticket for 2022. And she presciently refused to budge. And at least in 21, she refused to certainly leave as lieutenant governor. And it would have been very interesting had Cuomo remained in office, who he chose to run with. If simply he could have had a different running mate in the Democratic convention, they nominate someone else, then she has to either petition, run against Cuomo's pick and lose, or step aside. So history could have broken in a very different way, but instead Cuomo resigned, of course, and now she's governor. And despite everything, she is in a strong position. I don't want to overstate the damage Benjamin did because she is a prolific fundraiser. She herself is not scandal scarred, and she is generally liked or at least not widely disliked by New Yorkers. And I do think that gives her an advantage not being polarizing. She can get votes from a lot of different places.
When you talk about scandal scarred, the situation with the stadium in Buffalo, that's causing a lot of controversy. What do you think about that? And do you think that might hurt her?
It's an interesting question. I've written critically in multiple publications now about the fact that she authorized $1 billion taxpayer subsidy to the Buffalo Bills to build a new football stadium in the suburbs of Buffalo because the owners were worth at least $5 billion, were threatening to move, and they would only stay, they said, if the state and the county built a new stadium. And Hochul, rather than drive a harder bargain with them, she gave away the store. And Erie County is on the hook for at least $250 million. The state is going to be paying more than 600 million. And then there are various associated maintenance costs that will stretch over decades. And there's really no way from an economic development standpoint, this is a good idea. It's not going to recoup the tax revenue that's lost. It's not going to provide that many jobs in the stadiums in the suburbs of Buffalo. And of course, the Bills are very important to Buffalo. I don't want to be too callous here. I mean, they are a primary attraction, and they are extremely popular in the city and in the surrounding area. And I understand the pull of the Bills. But, you know, I think Hochul should have called their bluff because there really weren't a lot of places for the Bills to move to that were viable. But she didn't, and she ran through the agreement in the state budget, forcing state legislators to vote for it or vote against the entire budget. Some did that, but not enough to sink the budget. Will it hurt her? I'm not sure. I think that the taxpayer subsidy did not poll well statewide, and certainly Williams and Swazi will make it a campaign issue. The Bills are also popular in Erie County. I don't think Hochul is going to suffer in her home base for doing this. And across the state, by the time the June primary comes around, voters may be thinking about other things. And even into the fall, they may be thinking of other things. So while I myself am a critic of this, and I don't believe that sports stadiums are good economic development tools, I'm also not convinced. I'm not convinced this is going to be a major. You know, I don't think this will be a major campaign issue for her. Put it that way. I do think it's something she can push past, or even in certain quarters use to her advantage.
But I think Swazi more than Jemani Williams is going to hammer home on the Benjamin thing as well as the sports stadium. Don't you think that's going to hurt her? In the primary in June.
Yes, but the catch is how much money will either Swazi or Williams have to get that message out there. Swazi does have at least a few million in his bank account. Hochul just has so much more money. And I think that's something we've learned from these statewide races is they are expensive. And if you don't have the funds to really get your message out there, you can't succeed. Cuomo had many scandals when he ran for reelection in 2018. Joe Percoco had been arrested. There was the Buffalo Billion scandal. There's loads of controversy swirling around Cuomo as he sought his third term, and he's still pretty easily able to beat Cynthia Nixon. And partly that was because he spent a lot more money. He spent almost 30 million on the primary to beat her. She only had a few million. Now Hochul is not going to spend that much on the primary, but she has shown she can fundraise very, very aggressively. She can fundraise as well as Cuomo could. And that means that while Suozzi can hammer her and Williams can hammer her, there's going to be TV ads and radio ads galore come May and June touting Kathy Hochul. And when you're talking about a statewide race, that's really what matters because you can't knock on all those doors. Press conferences only get you so far. You're gonna have more than 1 million people coming to the polls, and that's really where money does count.
You know, we're right in the middle of April, and there's a little over 2 months left. And as in politics, one day can amount to a year. So what's a given now might be totally different in June. And Kathy Hochul at that point might not be sitting pretty. What do you think?
It's hard to say. I just think that I don't see a path to victory for Williams or Swazi unless Hochul faces a real scandal that hits her directly. Again, the Brian Benjamin indictment is a reflection of her poor choice, but the scandal itself had nothing to do with her. It was Brian Benjamin's state senate and controller campaigns. So you never know. Certainly, if you look at the mayor's race a year ago, it was quite unpredictable and had a lot of twists and turns.
Mm-hmm.
Here, though, it's a different kind of race in that there really isn't spending parity. The candidates for mayor last year were all spending a similar amount of money. Here, I just don't see how a Williams or a Swazi breaks through if Kathy Hochul, come the next filing period, has 25 million in the bank and she can spend half of it on the primary, let's say. You're talking about one candidate who's going to be on the air all the time. Swazi's been on the airwaves a little bit. He may get some traction in the suburbs. I could see that happening. I could see Williams getting some traction in the areas he represents. But to actually get close to winning, I mean, it's that's a different conversation. Can Swazi get to 20%, or can Williams get the Nixon 30%? Who knows, right? But actually getting that plurality or that majority, it's a different conversation. And I'd be very shocked if Hochul doesn't win the primary, and I'd be shocked if Hochul doesn't win comfortably. And I think we'll see what the next polls show, but at least the pre-Benjamin poll showed her way ahead. Maybe she'll see a drop, but I'd like to see the data, on how this Benjamin arrest kind of impacts her.
Ross, this is 2022. And technology more or less has changed everything. And I think technology plays a big role in political campaigns. There's all kinds of platforms that a candidate can use, Twitter and Facebook and TikTok, I guess. So, do you think money is still the predominant issue, or is that changing where candidates or anybody else who wants to change the narrative can use social media?
Yeah, I think it depends on the races. I think the if you talked about like a presidential race, money matters in the sense that you have to have money to run and get your message out there. but if you have two candidates who are extremely well known, like Joe Biden and Donald Trump, or Hillary and Trump, money it reaches a saturation point where Hillary actually spent more money than Trump in 2016, and Hillary still lost. Or you saw in the Senate races in 2020, you had Democratic candidates outspending Republicans and still losing. Sarah Gideon losing badly to Susan Collins, even though she had a lot more money. So there are high profile races where if both candidates have money, having money past a certain point means less. I do think there's that saturation point, but I think on more local races, having more money still matters. It's not everything. I don't want to say it's everything, but money, whatever platform you're reaching voters on, money does matter. Facebook, if you're running Facebook ads, if you have more money, you can run more Facebook ads. You can target people more efficiently and directly and aggressively if you have more money. um, you know, any sort of digital platform to reach voters, unless you're a celebrity and you can get a lot of free press, maybe you're already well known and you can draw attention to your TikToks or to your videos. I do think having money still matters. And I think in the case of the governor's race, when you have one candidate who has so much more money than the other, um, it really does come into play. And I just saw this firsthand, the Cuomo campaigns, where Cuomo, I wouldn't say ever ran great campaigns or was overly compelling, and certainly had a lot of controversy around him, but he was able just to really bludgeon his opponents in every race he ran in. And I do see something similar with Hochul, in terms of voters generally are fine with her. They maybe don't love her, but they don't dislike her, so they don't have a reason to vote against her. And she's going to be probably every day on TV very soon, and on the radio very soon, and on digital platforms very soon too. And you're talking about a statewide race where millions of people are going to be factoring in. That stuff starts to matter a lot.
So, you know, going back to when Cuomo ran the last time, Cynthia Nixon was not the strongest candidate, so I'm not surprised that, he beat her up quite badly. And I think that both Williams and Swazi are much stronger candidates than Cynthia Nixon was. So, as far as an incumbent beating challengers, I think Cuomo had the edge because Cynthia Nixon was not good. Whereas I know that Jumaane Williams and Tom Swazi have made a name for themselves, on Long Island and in New York City. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Jemani is definitely a stronger candidate than Cynthia Nixon, in that, he is an elected official. He has a base in New York City. He's going to get votes from progressives. He's going to get votes from Black voters to an extent. And he will compete. And I think Swazi has a base on Long Island. I think the issue for each of them is outside of their political bases, where can they get votes? And that's where the challenge comes into play for each candidate. But I agree. I mean, they have better platforms than Nixon did. They have more going for them.
Hmm.
I think what Nixon though had going for her was this concerted anti-Cuomo progressive vote that was not big enough to win by any means, but was enough to get her over 30% of the vote. I don't know where that anti-Hochul vote is coming from in the same way now, with bail reform, with expanding the use of cash bail, weakening the bail reform laws, with the Bill Stadium. There definitely are openings to criticize her. Will these be galvanizing for voters? I don't know, but I do think Swazi and Williams each bring a lot to the table. I just haven't seen yet in any polls that they're going to be able to move voters to a great degree, but that could change. We'll see. can either of them break through, and will Hochul, be on the defensive? It's still 2 months to go. It's still time. I think for me, I'd like to see how much money they each have in the bank, because if you're coming into the final few weeks of the campaign, and one candidate has $10 million to spend, one candidate has $100,000 to spend, it's a vast, vast gulf. And in a contest where you have to reach people in 62 counties, money matters a lot. I mean, that's paying for staff and for outreach, for headquarters,
Hmm.
for TV. Can Swazi and Williams get the money to do that? I think if they had equal amounts of money to Hochul, and there's a campaign, a matching fund system in place, I'd feel differently. I would say Hochul's got to really watch her back. But given that New York's campaign finance system is what it is, and it's quite bad and hasn't changed, she has a huge advantage.
But doesn't like in this new era of technology, don't you think the number of followers that you have on social media makes a big difference?
I don't know. I think it can, but I think it's also a bit overrated. You see, yes, certainly being a celebrity or having followers can move some votes, but also, we saw the New York City mayoral race. I mean, Andrew Yang had almost 2 million Twitter followers. Eric Adams had less than 20,000, I think.
Hmm.
Eric Adams won easily. And, having followers doesn't mean that you're going to be effective. It also doesn't mean that the people following you are registered Democrats in New York State who are going to vote in a primary, right? It's a big difference between I have all these followers, but then will they vote? And I think, for Jamani or for Swazi, it's not really something to take comfort in. One, they don't have that many followers relative to like an Andrew Yang. Even Jamani is big on social media, but less than 100,000 people. Yang's over a million, and then Swazi is not prolific on social media. So I think the follower counts mean a little bit, but not all that much, especially in Democratic primaries where the vote is restricted.
So, what do you see happening for lieutenant governor?
I think it's really interesting. I don't know. I mean, right now, I think Hochul is trying to see how she can get Benjamin off the ballot. It doesn't seem likely. It seems like the only ways to really do it are for him to move out of the state,
Hmm.
or die, and both are unlikely. The state legislature, in the assembly, Amy Paulin has proposed a bill to actually change the election law so Benjamin can be removed, but it seems like the state Senate Democrats are not interested in moving that bill. So if they don't want to do it, she's stuck with Benjamin, at least having him on the ballot. And that means Ana Maria Archila or Diana Reina will probably be the nominee. And I think each of them have strengths. I think Reina has strengths that she's a former elected official. She's a city councilwoman in Brooklyn. She used to be the deputy borough president under Eric Adams. She probably can appeal to a lot of moderate voters and suburban voters, and sort of working class Latina and Latino voters, but she also isn't that well known. Archila is a bit more prominent, and she has the Working Families Party and will have kind of more energy behind her. So I think it's very interesting. I'd say Archila is probably a favorite at this point, but you don't know, especially if Reina can raise money, or maybe Hochul decides she wants to support Reina, and then Reina can benefit from all Hochul spending. Hochul maybe will spend money on her behalf, but I don't know. I think it's very up in the air right now.
What do you think of the scenario that Kathy Hochul would have been wise to appoint Jemani Williams as her lieutenant governor? What do you think about that?
She could, but I don't know if I don't know if she'd want to. If she'd want to have Jamani in her administration. I mean, yeah, you neutralize a threat, you can do it. I just don't know if she'll want to, and have him there. It
No,
seems like something she'd want to
what I'm
avoid.
saying, what I'm saying is when she first became governor, at that time, when she had, had to pick a lieutenant governor. I think she would have been much wiser to pick Jemani Williams.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I think you could have built a real um, kind of a real cross ideological coalition and neutralize threats on the left and had a progressive administration. I agree. I think Williams would have been a much better choice than Benjamin. I don't know if he was interested in giving up being public advocate to be lieutenant governor, but yeah, I think he would have been a better choice.
So what do you think of the idea of Jay Jacobs trying to form a third party? You think he's trying to squeeze Cuomo back into the limelight?
I don't think so. I don't quite get it. I think he should just focus on building the Democratic Party. I think he's nervous that the conservatives get more votes than the Working Families Party, and he dislikes the Working Families Party.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you know, I think it's a silly idea. I just don't see the point. Just seems like a strange scheme that he's attempting. And I just, yeah, I would be wary of it, if I were a Democrat or a progressive.
So we just have about a minute or two left. Why don't you give yourself a little plug, what you write and where you write?
Sure. So I'm a contributing writer at The Nation. I have a column with The Guardian and with Cranes, and I also write fairly frequently for New York Magazine. And I have a Substack newsletter people can subscribe to. I encourage
Mm-hmm.
you to read it. Just my name, rossbarkin.substack.com, and you can read for free or pay. Payment is appreciated. Um, and you can read me in any of those places. And I write a lot on New York stuff. I
Great.
think people will enjoy it.
Great. Ross, thank you for taking the time to be on Focus on Albany. I hope we talk again during this campaign season. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focus on Albany. And if you like this conversation, subscribe to my YouTube page. Thanks, Ross. We'll talk again. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great
Sure.
day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.